for our second part, we're doing some more mixing and looking for characteristics of chemical reactions. We have 4 different recipes, and each of you will get one of the recipes. The recipe that you'll be making is A, B, C, or D. A is magnesium sulfate and sodium carbonate. B is magnesium sulfate and calcium chloride. C is magnesium sulfate and sodium bicarbonate. And D is calcium chloride and sodium bicarbonate. And so you're actually making the recipe in the bag. So the mixture and the reaction is going to happen in the bag. Before you test, make sure you're wearing goggles and make sure that you're taking the temperature and recording the temperature of each of the solutions, and then cleaning it before you go on to the next. So our first one, I'm making A. I'm making magnesium sulfate solution and mixing it with sodium carbonate. So the directions tell me I'm using 3 tablespoons of each of the 2 solutions. You want to make sure you clean it before you do the mixing. And when you are taking your tablespoon, make sure you try to get that level. Don't try not to spill it or get it on your hands. So once I've got my recording, now the temperature is going to be in the bag. And so when we mix them, the reaction is going to take place in the bag. And so what you'll find is you kind of have to drop it into a corner. So I'm going to be taking 3 tablespoons of my solution. This is the solution for magnesium sulfate. I am going to probably have to pour it into the tablespoon, not the teaspoon. That's the larger size. So I have my 3 tablespoons into the cup and pour it into the bag. And so now, when here I have my thermometer in the bag with the magnesium sulfate in the corner. So before I dip it in the sodium bicarbonate, I'm going to dry off and clean off the spoon. Remember, I'm looking for my observations. I've got my thermometer in there to see if the temperature is going up or not. I've recorded the temperature. So now I'm going to take 3 tablespoons, and as I pour it in, I'm going to be really careful, and as soon as I put it in there, I'm looking to see what reactions take place and recording my observation. And I'm putting 3, so there's 2. I'm looking at the temperature. I'm looking to see what happens when I add the 3 tablespoons. So now I'm recording the temperature. I'm looking what happens in the bag. I can feel any temperature changes, and you're going to be making your observations and write them down on the chart. Now, since you're only doing one, the rest of the data has to come from everybody else in the room, because everybody has a different different mixture. So when you go around the room, you'll be filling out the chart from your from other students. So make sure you write down on the chart, data chart 2, all of your findings. And that's it for your second part of your experiment. Before we finish and do our analysis questions, I want to make sure you understand that we're doing a claim, evidence, and reasoning. And what we really are trying to figure out is write a scientific explanation that explains how you know a chemical reaction has occurred. And of course, you have to have evidence. And so it's very important that you write down the evidence in your data chart. And then we're going to reason through how and why we know a chemical reaction has occurred. So our first analysis question is, how did you know a chemical reaction happened? Well, there were several that happened. First of all, there were several color changes and tones of different colors that really, the color definitely changed. The other thing that you noticed and you wrote on your chart is that the temperature, there were several times the temperature went up, and there was one time the temperature actually dropped. The other thing that you saw is gas emission. There were bubbles, and if you sealed the bag, you'd actually feel the bag blowing up just a little bit with the gas that was formed from one of the mixtures. The other thing that happened is a precipitate formed. And in the one that I did in A, you can see the mixture has gotten really cloudy, and you can see like little white spots in there. That was the precipitate. You also saw that precipitate in the sodium carbonate. There was actually crystals in the bottom that had formed when the two chemicals were mixed. Our second question is, what reactants had a color change? Well, in a way, all of them changed a lot. The one that were changed really dramatically is the calcium chloride and the sodium carbonate, but almost all of them created some sort of color change. Well, what reactants had a gas form? C, the recipe for C, the magnesium sulfate and the sodium bicarbonate, it produced gas. And again, if you seal the bags, you'll notice that you got that gas because the bag would kind of blow up there. The other one that produced gas was the calcium chloride and the sodium bicarbonate. It also produced gas. Okay, our last question, number 4. What reactants had a precipitate? In this part, we had magnesium sulfate and sodium bicarbonate. It created those little spots. You saw them. There was like some kind of solid that was created. Also D, calcium chloride and sodium bicarbonate also created a precipitate. And the magnesium sulfate and the calcium chloride also produced a precipitate. So now we're ready with our data to create our claim, evidence, and reasoning for our CER. Thank you very much.